Ecological succession is foundational to the practices of regenerative agriculture, permaculture, and natural farming. Unfortunately, there is little to no information out there that pulls together all the factors of ecological succession and applies them to these practices. So this is going to be a two-part video, a two-part series. The first part, we're going to look at ecological succession. What is ecological succession? How do we understand it? What can we learn from history? And how do we wrap our minds around what is going on in an ecological environment? The second video is going to deal with taking the information that we learned in the first part and applying ecological succession principles to farming. What does this look like to put this in practice, to actually take these principles and apply it to our farms, to our land, to our gardens, whatever you're managing, apply it, and then see that bear fruit and see that just escalate the natural ecosystem that we're working with. So what is ecological succession? Ecological succession is plants going from a low level, less plants, less life, to a higher level. And there's some misconceptions about this. We're going to deal with that in a little bit. But first, let's look at what are we talking about when we're talking about ecological succession. So in a low ecological succession stage, we have bare dirt, if you will. Rocks, very little going on life-wise. This is characterized by being bacterially dominant. The soil life, the life in that soil is bacteria. And as we move to the higher stages, we'll see some changes in the microbial life. So this is starting with bare ground, very little plant matter, and then moving up through the various stages. Our second stage might be our annual weeds. And a lot of our vegetables fall into this annual weed category. And then we might move to perennial weeds and grasses, and then to small shrubs and small trees, larger trees, and on we go. And as we go through this succession, we see a shift from being bacterially dominant in our microbial life to being fungally dominant. Now, I want to make this clear. There is more bacteria at this higher stage than there is bacteria here. But there's even more fungi at this high stage than there is in the low stage. So it's an increase in life, an increase in biodiversity, and an increase in energy in the system. So what does this actually look like? What is the process of ecological succession? In this low stage, we have these low succession plants, your annual weeds. They grow very quickly in a bacterially dominant soil. They grow very quickly, put on a lot of biomass, and then they die. If you're in a temperate climate, they die in the fall when coming into winter. In a tropical environment, you're going to tend to have more perennial plants, and your annual plants just go with typically the dry seasons. So these plants live and then die. What happens when they die? The plant matter, both above and below ground, decomposes. And this is critical to ecological succession. This is what drives ecological succession. Living plants above ground that we can see, dying plants, they go back to the earth and they feed the next generation. And this happens again above and below ground. And as we go up in ecological succession, we get deeper roots, we get more biomass, and we build up life in the system. Now, this can occur without interference, if you will, in a robust environment. Alan Savory likes to talk about brittle and non-brittle environments. In a brittle environment, this will not occur in the same way that it occurs in a temperate climate in western North Carolina, in a temperate rainforest. They are going to act very, very differently. So there are some misconceptions in this that ecological succession looks the same way every time. And that's an oversimplification of ecological succession. It looks different in different environments, and it looks different when there are different factors playing upon it, whether it be people or animals. Now, historically, when there were less people involved, fire, volcanic activity, earthquakes, glacial movement, floods, they provided that reset where the plants were killed and then started over. That reset, pushing it back, pushing the plant matter to the ground. Animals have also played a pivotal role in ecological succession. They still do. Animals are very important in ecological succession. In the past, some examples of animals that have been important for ecological reset, the North American bison would have tended to kill trees by rubbing them with their horns and trampling on their roots and killing them, and that would have moved us back to a lower level in succession, and the decomposing matter from those trees would have fed and moved us back up a layer in succession, or found some point of stability in there. Passenger pigeons are another one that was very important for cycling energy and nutrients in these systems and pushing things back and keeping them more open and allowing a light into the lower levels of strata. A reset is very, very important in ecological succession. You have to have resets because this high level, while it has a lot of biomass and it has a lot of life in it, it tends to stagnate. And we don't want that. We don't want that stagnation at the top. We need to reset because a lot of the diversity and life and usability is in these middle stages. So we need to keep that in mind. The goal is not always to get to the top. Sometimes we need to. We want to get those old growth forests. We want to get those higher levels of succession. But we also need to be aware that there's value in these lower stages. There's even value at the lowest stages. Not all low stages are equal. We're going to get to that. So humans are very, very critical in this principle of ecological succession. One of the ways that humans have played a part in this is with fire, using fire as an ecological tool, a reset tool, and also by affecting animal populations. In more modern times, tillage machinery has been involved in ecological succession. The problem with this is that it allows us to keep ourselves in this bottom stage of succession to the point of detriment. While this bottom stage, where a lot of our vegetables and food is grown, is very productive. It can be very, very productive. If you keep it here too long, it can destroy the soil life because we lose a lot of the carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen that makes up these plants. We lose that to the atmosphere in the form of methane and CO2. So keeping ourselves here is detrimental because we lose that energy and biomass to the atmosphere, and eventually we become weak and have a weak level of succession. It's important to understand that not all successional peaks, or for that matter, any stage in succession, is created equal. I've been in forests in these upper stages of succession that had almost no topsoil. And what topsoil was there was eroding because there wasn't enough light getting in there, and because the ecosystem was not diverse enough, there wasn't an understory to hold the soil in place. So any part of these successional stages can be either a high value, high energy level, or it can be a low energy, low value stage in succession. So for an example, in this bottom stage, if we have a plowed field, just a bare plowed field, that is not the same as if we have, say, trampled grass. If we come through and we trample down some grass, a herd of bison or some cattle come through and trample that down, similar stage in succession, it allows things to reset and grow. We're putting that biomass back into the ground and we're allowing other plants to grow, but they're not created equal. Another example in these mid stages, if you just have something like Bradford pear and tree of heaven, autumn olive in this mid stage, that's not going to be the same as if you also have persimmon, wild plum, elderberry, the list goes on. There's so many things that you can have in this mid stage. If you just have a few plants that are your pioneer plants in this mid stage, you are, or lower mid stage, you are not in a high performing mid-level successional stage. So there's a difference between a good performing, a high performing successional stage and a low performing successional stage anywhere in this spectrum of the strata heights or this process. So the goal here in thinking about this is thinking about, are these successional stages, are they healthy? That's what we need to think about. If we're managing land, we need to think about what is the health of this successional stage, because you can have forests up here, like I said, that are not healthy. And some of the syntropic farmers down in Brazil are actually taking down these upper successional stages and resetting it back in order to reintroduce diversity and actually make these systems healthier. So a misconception is that the upper levels are the pinnacle of natural ecosystems, and that is not actually true. So in the second part of this series, we're actually going to look at how do we apply these principles to our land, to our farms, to our engagement with the land. So stay tuned for that.